Good evening, members. Good evening. I'm Councillor Hickson, the Chairman of the Climate Transition Corporate and Environmental Services Policy Advisory Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anybody else be recording the proceedings? I ask so that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated, and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. So, are there any apologies?
Councillor Jenkins-Baldock.
Any others? Do we know? No. Okay, thank you. Are there any substitute members?
Councillor Cleater for Councillor Jenkins-Baldock.
Thank you. There are two urgent items on tonight's meeting. So we've got item 14A, which is Heather House. First Homes, it's urgent as the sales transaction for the homes proposed needs to be completed by the end of September. And item 15, the property disposal, is urgent as the proposed completion of the disposal depends on a timely exchange of contracts. Paper copies of item 15 were circulated over the weekend, and item 14 was published yesterday with paper copies today. Is that agreed? Thank you. So item 4, are there any visiting members?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Paul Wilby for items 14 and 15 to disclose that I do have an interest in with an organisation involved with item 14 and 15.
Hi, Chairman. Councillor Brian Clark, I'm here for 14 and 15, and just to declare that I'm a part of an organisation that might have an interest. Thank you.
Thank you. So item 5, are there any disclosures by members or officers? No. So I move that all items... Oh, are there any disclosures of lobbying? No. So I move that all items be taken in public. However, if members wish to discuss the information contained within exempt appendices to item 15, property disposal, yellow pages, it will be necessary to move into closed session due to the likely disclosure of exempt information for the reasons specified on the papers, having applied the public interest test. Is that agreed? Thank you. So, item 8, minutes of the last meeting. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? So, none. So, I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of July 2025 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. So, item 9, forward plan. Are there any comments on the forward plan, or do Cabinet members wish to make any comments? No? Okay, so therefore I move that the forward plan be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Couch? Hello. Do you have any disclosures of lobbying or... Okay, all right, thank you very much. Okay, so... where are we up to? First one, yeah. So, first quarter risk update. This is going to be introduced by Councillor Jeffrey, the leader of the council.
Thank you. So, first quarter finance update looks quite good. We have a favourable variance of 26,000 for the current year, which is a very nice place to be, particularly compared to last year when we were looking at a much bigger projected deficit. The current variance is projected partly because of a significant better return on the council's cash balances than we'd anticipated, but that's offset by, as usual, by pressures on homelessness. Capital itself, some expenditures slipping, specifically around corporate property acquisitions of about 1.4 million, simply because there aren't any opportunities that have arisen. There is a small correction on page 30, which ought not to refer to the flood action plan, but to Fairmeadow Underpass, by the way. And the only other bit to draw your attention to is the approval for write-off of 3 irrecoverable debts on rent. We've got as far as we can, and we now need to move on and get rid of those, write those debts off. Mark's happy to take any questions.
Councillor Hub.
Thank you, Chair. I've got about 4 points to make. The one which didn't really require any answer is around homelessness. I seem to remember that when we were looking at the budget in the sort of autumn and winter, things like group leaders and various other meetings, I did keep reiterating that were we putting in enough for homelessness? Because I've been on this council since 2014, and every year we've overspent on the homelessness budget. I can't think. The only period when we possibly didn't was during COVID, when you weren't allowed legally to evict tenants. But other than that, we've overspent year on year on year. And I asked the questions, were the assumptions made in the current budget adequate? And was assured they were, and yet again, they've proven not to. And we're only, in terms of the financial year, coming up to the halfway point, and we're already overspending considerably. And there's probably no indication that that's going to go down. It will continue, as has been the case, on an upward trend. So whilst at the moment overall it's netted off, I do suspect we will find that deteriorates further. My next question is around the Archbishop's Palace. And I noticed that on page 16, we're forecasting to have an overspend of £175,000. Now, the Archbishop's Palace has been an ongoing issue since Kent County Council notified us about 4 or 5 years ago that they were terminating the lease, and they're now gone up to Oakwood Park. And we, as a council, have undertaken various reviews of what to do with it. And it's just rather, I suppose, depressing to find that we're now looking at unlikely to have a tenant occupying it before September 2026. That's a good 4 or 5 years it will have taken to find a tenant. And the other thing what I find surprising on that is when we look at the capital item on page 29, we've got the Archbishop's Palace, the estimate to spend on it, because I think there was always an expectation to let it out as a wedding venue, which is my understanding what the plan is now. We'll have to do considerable upgrade to its infrastructure. So £1.7 million, fair enough, put in the budget. But if we look at it, the forecast variance at the year end is 1.35 million. So we're only going to spend about 350,000 of that £1.7 million in this year. And it makes me wonder, is September 2026 either unduly optimistic for a tenant to move in, or are we not going to do the works which we felt and we were advised previously were needed to be done to enable the building to be sublet? But I'd say it's something which has come up, time and time again, and we just, we seem to be crawling along in terms of the progress on it. And an old building, one of the oldest buildings in the borough, is sitting there empty. not used. Now I know obviously it's not this or the previous administration's fault that KCC obviously moved out, but I just feel that we need to really push on that. Yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Mark, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the questions, Councillor Harper. So far as homelessness is concerned, you're right. We have consistently had pressures in this area, and we did build more money into the budget. But the issue that we have at the moment is that numbers are stubbornly high and actually inching higher. We're currently looking at about 270 families in temporary accommodation. Now, an increasing number of those are in our own accommodation properties that we've bought, and those properties are steadily coming on stream. But the numbers are higher than we'd anticipated. I would point out, though, that of the overspend on housing, only 178,000 is actually to do with temporary accommodation directly. 165 is around homelessness prevention, where we're using the council's resources to enable people to go into private accommodation, and that is preventing them from becoming homeless. And okay, it's all part of the homelessness budget, but it's not the direct impact of the cost of temporary accommodation. And that overspend of 178, yes, it's an overspend, but it's a lot less than we had at this time last year. So I do believe we're making progress on homelessness. As far as the Archbishop's Palace is concerned, as you've said, this has been going on for some time since Kent County Council handed back the lease, and there have been various reports to different committees setting out what's happened. Unfortunately, there was the original plans for a hotel on the site, which proved abortive, and we went out subsequently and identified an operator who would take it on as a wedding and events venue. And that operator is very much still ready to open the palace for that use. But it's been a complex process, as you might expect, with a building of that age, and getting designs in place that allow, without any change to the exterior fabric, it to be used in the way that is intended has taken time. Having said that, we're in a position now where we hope to sign an agreement for lease shortly with the prospective tenant, and we hope also to submit a planning application for the interior works that are needed. And so we'd envisage the actual construction work to kick off in the new year, and that explains why you can see some spend starting to come through in the capital programme, but not all of it will be spent in this financial year. So yes, it's been going on for some time, but that's not been there hasn't been a lack of activity. It's been pursued vigorously by the council, but it is a big and complex project.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, just to come back briefly on the homelessness, I note that we put out a further advert for private sector leasing, non-leasing, to boost our TA accommodation. I think it was last week, because I got some challenge over it, if I remember rightly. So we are actively looking at how we mitigate that rise, which every council in the country is facing, and we're not doing badly on it comparatively.
I mean, I accept, and I know this administration and the previous administration and the one before that, everybody has been working very hard on this. So we've got the policy where we buy out houses in the open market, in your ward and in my ward and Maureen's ward. And we've got the 1,000 affordable home strategy, quality home strategy, whatever we want to call it. So we're doing all the right things. It's just the fact that despite doing all of that and pushing as fast as we can do, and as you just explained, the thing, you know, advertising in terms of private rented, the number of people being made homeless is just continuing to escalate. And Maidstone's not unique, it's happening everywhere. I would just urge that when we look at, say, next year's budget, that we put in possibly more realistic assumptions, because what worries me is that whilst when everyone voted for the budget, what was it, February, you know, it balanced off, but I'm not surprised we're already finding the pressures on homelessness heading up, and they will only go up. But anyway.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, so the committee on page 12 is being asked to, there's two things for noting and an approval of a write-off, so I'll take them all in one go. Are those recommendations agreed? Okay, thank you very much. So, next item on the agenda, item 11. This is also going to be introduced by, it's going to be Councillor Jeffrey Show tonight, by Councillor Jeffrey, Leader of the Council.
Thank you. I'm going to make a very short introduction and then hand over to Anna. The performance report is based on last year. It's therefore shaped around the previous strategic plan. So it kind of feels a bit strange, given that that was gone nearly 9 months ago. But it is right that it's structured in the way it is for transparency and governance purposes, because it is last year's and the new strategic plan came in this year. So it does read a little bit strange, but I'm going to hand over to Anna to cover off a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Good evening, members. So as Councillor Jeffrey said, it is a retrospective look at performance from the period 2024 to 2025, and it is important that we report back for transparency purposes. These indicators were based on our previous priorities, and throughout the annual report we have tried to show where those priorities and indicators connect to our new priorities. And this report has been a bit developed than what you would have seen previously, because what we agreed last year was that we would move to monitoring more through a dashboard, but with a half-yearly report and a more substantial annual report which shows trends, more detail and information to provide context, as well as where we had it, benchmarking information as well. So hopefully that has been interesting for you. Of the 28 KPIs that fall within the remit of this committee, 17 of the KPIs were not targeted. They were provided for information only. Of those with a target, 45.4% met the target assigned to them. Of those KPIs that missed target, just over 18% missed target by less than 10%, and just over 35% missed target by more than 10%. One of the key things probably to highlight to you within the remit of this committee is that our waste collection service change contractor of the start of the year, which I am sure you are all very well aware, and the challenges that we encountered because of that during the transition affected a number of areas. So it wasn't just missed bin collections. You will also see that the percentage of FOIs responded to within time was also impacted. This is because the information governance team were dealing with a much more significant increase in complaints during that time, and that affects timescales across their wider work. So this report is for information, for your reflection on the performance of the indicators relevant for this committee over the last year in relation to our last strategic plan. But obviously these indicators, many of them will still feel very relevant for you today. So you may have some questions or some recommendations based upon that, and I'm happy to answer where possible or provide information back to you.
And one just final key little point from me. Obviously this is retrospective, so it's 6 months old. We now have the performance portal, which hopefully members can all see, which has much more up-to-date live information which I personally use quite a lot to keep an eye on things, and I do hope other members do too, because that's where the live stuff is. So whilst this is 6 months out of date and a full year report, actually we have got that live information out there, or as live as it can be.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harper.
One of my points I was going to ask has been answered by Anna, which is around the refuse contract and why some of the figures clearly dipped and so on. My other one is on page 48, and it's under the biodiversity, climate change and parking services element, and it's basically on that graph, so showing a number of electric vehicle charging points or whatever across the borough. And the fact that at that point in time there was 107 in total. I'm just thinking, as we're moving rapidly towards 2030, when it won't be possible to buy anything other than an electric vehicle in the new market, you know, these figures in terms of the number of charging points are just woefully inadequate, and actually will mean that I'm sure ultimately the government will have to change its deadline, because I can't expect a whole population to drive around and not be able to, well, once your battery's gone flat, you won't be able to charge it up because there'll be nowhere to do it. I wondered what, if we know where Kent County Council is in terms of this, and I can see Shelley coming forward, because I remember coming here to a briefing when looking at who's a councillor here now. I think I'm probably the only person who was on the council then. This is about 5 years ago, when we were looking into a briefing on electric charging points and how we could go. I see Anna can remember, and talking about street lamp posts and so on, and how it would require Kent County Council to sort of change its policy. And I suspect Shelley's going to tell us, 3 or 4 years later. It's not a flag, it doesn't count. Okay. Jeez. 3 or 4 years later, that we don't really have much information as to what the county council is planning to do to get these numbers into the thousands, because if we've got 100,000 cars in the borough, presumably at some point in the next 10 years, we're going to need 100,000 charging points in the borough.
Good evening, members, and thank you for the question, Councillor Harper. So just a quick update on the KCC funding, the Levi funding, which was for rollout of on-street EV charge points across the borough. So for Maidstone, we were allocated for this year a maximum of 25 charge points, and then that will steadily increase each year after this year. We provided them within the time frame that they stipulated, over 100 potential sites that we recommended, and I just followed up with them recently to understand which ones were selected. They've come back and said, after cross-referencing against various infrastructure requirements and doing site visits, they have selected 15. So there are 15 confirmed for Maidstone for this year. I have just gone back to them to say, if we have 25 allocated, I would really like to maximise the 25. So can we identify the other 10 and get that moving, and then we'll keep that list live for following years.
Was that 15 in the whole year, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay.
That's been identified as a Doge thing.
Yes. So the first year was intentionally low. That's because they knew there were going to be all sorts of barriers and things. So for each authority, there were specific numbers that they'd calculated. For Maidstone, it was 25.
Yeah. The KCC are quite, well, I say mad. It is driving us insane. They have got no interest in tackling any of this. They don't seem to have any desire to work on EVs or any aspect of net zero at all from what they've told us. So I think this is going to get worse, not better, and we will fight it every inch of the way.
Yes, I would imagine that, given that a lot of the land is going to be highways land, that's going to make it quite tricky, isn't it? Okay, thank you. Councillor Cleaver.
Yeah, so basically the missing 10 are not guaranteed. And do we know if they've been identified by Doge as a saving for KCC? And if so, could they inform us as soon as possible? But the other issue is about, as well as the stuff that we're doing with the on-street parking, what are we doing about working with other organisations? When I travel back home, there's actually now petrol stations with charging points as well, and I'll be honest, the way KCC is going, we are really going to have to start thinking outside the box to meet the needs of those who have electric cars. Thank you.
Thank you. We have actually just recently added, or have added to our sustainable business directory, a company called Zapco, which is hopefully an opportunity to fill a part of the market which is connecting rural and semi-rural businesses to the network.
I think I'll just point out as well that a lot of those that are at petrol stations are superchargers, and they are quite expensive. So if you charge at home, it's not that expensive, but if you charge at a petrol station, it's pretty expensive. Councillor Coach.
Just whilst we're on EV chargers, have we maximised charge points in our own owned car parks if we know that highways and KCC will be an issue, or are we dependent on government funding for on-street?
To answer, yes, we have maximised it in our own car parks, and there is quite an interesting calculation which I would need parking to go through with me here tonight, but they have run me through it before. It's based on capacity and usage and all sorts of things. So yeah, they do have a model for calculating ahead of when it's needed. So I think they've got the sweet spot for our parking, our NBC parking. So the bottleneck has been the on-street charge points and limitations around infrastructure and funding. So that's why this Levi funding was such an opportunity. So those 25 for this year we really want to maximise, but they have been a little bit slow to respond. So over the next couple of weeks I'm looking to try and get a little bit more information for how we can get those those additional 10 identified and selected.
Yeah, I'd like to add a recommendation, or to the ones we've got on the report, really, to request the cabinet to look into this, to actually produce an action plan on what Maidstone Council can do, I suppose, within its own control, to really ramp up the number of EV charging points over the next couple of years, because to head to 2030 and have a borough where we're in the median and there's only like 100 places, we need thousands. So we need to really think, as Maureen said, out of the box. How can we get these things in? Because rather than 25 a year, we need to be putting in 1,000, 2,000 every year between now and 2030 to even have any hope. Because most people live in terraced houses in the borough with no off-street parking, as we all know. So we really are going to have to think out of the box. So as I say, we could add a recommendation that the cabinet look into an action plan on what we can do as a council and with partners to address this issue.
May I just respond to that? Sorry, it's just to let you know that actually within the biodiversity and climate change action plans, that one of the actions is to draft a strategy for EV. So it is in there as one of the actions we intend to complete.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Chairman. Have we got data for how, in our car parks where we've got EV chargers, how often they're being used? Like the usage data of what we currently have?
Yes, absolutely. I don't have that those numbers in my mind right now, but yes, our parking team absolutely monitor that. Yeah, they can pull all of that information.
Would you be able to could you get someone to email it to me after the meeting, if that's all right?
Yeah, sure. Just let me know exactly what you're after.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the... Councillor Summersgill.
Just trying to clarify, are you solely looking at urban positions or rural? Because KCC have funded 2 rounds of rural ones to parishes, and which many parishes have put EV chargers in their parks, and we were unsuccessful twice in my parish, but the parish council is now funding its own charging system. But at £10,000 per unit, if you want 1,000 in, it's a very big number, and you have to have three-phase power if you want the higher charging ones as well.
I mean, I think it's across the whole borough, but I'm sure the biggest problem may well be in the urban parts of Maidstone, because we don't have parish councils. And yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money. You know, somewhere society's got to find this money. Otherwise, we might as well just forget moving to electric vehicles, because it's not going to happen. Because people are not going to buy them if they can't charge them. I mean, it'd be like, yeah, and that we'll stay with older and older petrol and diesel vehicles, which will be polluting more as time goes by. So I think I accept it's a very expensive thing. That's what I'm saying, looking at working with partners, how we can get this stuff done.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, so we are being asked to page 36. It's noting the report and then any additional recommendations. So, Councillor Harper, are you considering that as a recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the wording of the amendment or the additional recommendation would be that we request the Cabinet to bring forward an action plan as to how Maidstone Council, working with partners, can ensure there is an adequate supply of EV charging points to meet the government's 2030 deadline for stopping the sale of all petrol and diesel driven vehicles.
Okay. Yeah, we need a seconder. Okay, so we've got a seconder. All right, so in which case we can vote on it. In favour? Okay. Against? Abstain? So that's passed. Okay. So, and then noting the report. Is it agreed that we note the report? Okay, thank you very much. So, item 12. Nature Recovery and Climate Change Action Funds. This is going to be introduced by Councillor Summerskill, the Cabinet Member for Climate Transition and Nature Recovery.
Thank you, Chair. This is detailed to approve the Nature Recovery and Climate Action bidding rounds, prospectus and timeframes. As a background, in June the Cabinet approved the Biodiversity Climate Change Action Plan, and within that there was a budget for Nature Recovery and Climate Action Funds that together totaled £500,000. The budget for these funds was allocated and approved in the medium-term financial strategy by the Council in February, and in July a new grants policy, not necessarily just for this item, was approved by Cabinet, detailing the process for managing small, medium and large grants. These prospectuses have been drafted for both Nature Recovery and Climate Action Funds and guided by the medium-term financial strategy budget, and delivering on the commitments we've made in the Biodiversity and Climate Change Action Plans. As part of the bidding, applicants must demonstrate how ongoing maintenance of a project will be delivered, and successful applicants will be expected to sign a grant funding agreement. As to the Nature Recovery Fund, 488,000 is there to award, and if I can use my O-level maths and refer you to item 211, there's a slight numerical error in that the phases 2, 3 and 4 are 130,000 for each financial year and not 122,000, and you'll then find that the four numbers add up to 488,000. We're staggering the grants and the delivery of projects to minimise risk and allow to learning from the first projects to apply to later stages of funding tranches. The Climate Action Fund is a much smaller £12,000 award which will apply over 3 years, and this is for nature-based solutions and small grants of £1,000 to £3,000 as expected. We'll have discretionary ability to adapt these tranches and phases of funding depending on the volumes and types of bids we receive. And in order to ensure impartiality, all external applications will be assessed with a decision-making board, including an independent representative, which will provide external assessment and scrutiny to the decision-making and ensure decisions on awarding grants are balanced and objective. I won't go into detail of what's on the in the prospectuses, but just to note that they include the 122,000 should include 130,000, and people who can apply. It's all for projects that are within Maidstone Borough. Where it says joint projects on Maidstone Borough Council land, that doesn't mean just Maidstone Borough Council land. It's land within Maidstone Borough Council, in case anybody was going to raise that point. And awards will not be made to private individuals and organisations who need to have been operational for a minimum of 12 months prior to applying and demonstrate a track record of activity. And there is a very detailed bid assessment with weightings for various criteria and descriptions, which I'm happy and Shelley would be happy to discuss if there's any particular items within there that cause concern.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cleater.
Just a quick question on page 67, staged payments. It says for larger grants, a staged approach to payments may be adopted to lower the risk associated with the management of funds. I mean, probably to protect us, we should say will be adopted, I would suggest. Only because I have experience of working at another council where basically stage payments weren't done, and basically the council didn't get value for money, and as it was a 5-year contract, for example, it was quite a lot of money wasted. So I think, I mean, stage payments, we need evidence that people are delivering, and I think that's really important. We've got other safeguards, as you've just explained, but for big grants, I do think we should have a stage payments approach will be adopted. That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Yes, and I believe we'll adopt that, especially where a project may go over 2 years as well.
Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I think this is a very good report, and it'd be good to find out, you know, as we go through this, the types of grants we're making. The only comment, and I completely agree with what Maureen was just saying, is actually on paragraph 2.11, and it's the idea of doing it over 4 phases. Now, I'd perhaps urge the Cabinet to think about doing it over 3 phases, only in the sense that phase 4 will come up when the council's been abolished. You know, we're not likely to be here in spring 2028, or if we are, it'll be our final meeting when we won't be awarding any money, because those powers will have been removed from us. So I would suggest that we do this over 3 phases to ensure, and with the last phase being your phase 3, which is spring 2027, to make sure that the money does get spent in Maidstone before the council's abolished. So yeah, the Cabinet could give consideration to that.
Well, we did start with a 2-year one, and it shifted to 4. But I'll take that point into consideration. I don't know if Mark has any point to make on that one.
No, we've allocated the money already, so it's a member decision as to how it's profiled.
Councillor Coach.
Two questions on the second prospectus on the smaller grant for community groups. I was wondering, firstly, what's going to be done from an accessibility point of view to make sure that groups, especially if they're volunteer dependent, can apply online or paper versions, and also the technical expertise they might need to have a successful application. And then the second question is on page 93 regarding long-term sustainability, and that they need to demonstrate how the project will be maintained over time, which does make sense. But I was just wondering, is there any additional support the council could offer, especially if we're talking smaller grants for smaller groups, where that money's not going to stretch as far into the long term? Just what, if there's any other consideration that could be made to ensure these projects do have a long-term impact, because it's quite easy for small allotments or community groups to have all the best intentions in the short term, but it's really hard for them to maintain if they they receive this money once and then their volunteers move away or something happens. I was just wondering if there's anything else we could add in there.
Thank you. That was a really good question. I think with respect to the smaller grants, from some of the expressions of interest that we've seen coming through, we're talking small amounts. From what it seems, these kind of projects are not something with really high maintenance costs on an ongoing basis. This is talking about volunteer time really more than anything. So we can assess that on a case-by-case basis as they come in, and the point of releasing the expression of interest ahead with plenty of time before releasing the eligibility criteria and launching the fund was to gather as much information on interest levels for the two funds in the meantime. As I've said, that they're sort of more in the hundreds for that particular fund than into the thousands from what I've seen so far. So I don't foresee that being a huge issue. With respect to accessibility, I will need to take some advice on the different channels there, but yes, it is something that I am very passionate about, making sure that we're reaching communities and people and individuals and groups that need it the most.
Thank you. No other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, right, so page 62. So the recommendation is to approve the Nature Recovery and Climate Action bidding rounds, prospectuses and timeframes. Is that agreed? Okay, would you like to speak, Councillor Summerskill?
Can I just mention, with that provision of those change of numbers from 122 to 130,000?
Yes, of course, yes. I saw I saw Shelley amending the report in reception as we came in. So I'm sure that, yeah, so with the correct figures, of course. Thank you.
And on stage payments, the use of will, not may.
Yeah, okay.
To try and spend more quickly.
Okay. That's fine, okay. Right. Thank you. Right, so item number 13. Flood, and I'm sure that everybody drove through quite a few of them on their way to this meeting today. Flood alleviation, flood risk alleviation. So this is going to be introduced again by Councillor Summerskill, the Cabinet Member for Climate Transition and Nature Recovery.
Yes, and as a ward member for Yalding, amongst other places, and a flood warden in my own parish, close to my heart. This flood risk mitigation being an important part of climate resilience, and this report is describing progress on 4 different initiatives that have been underway in the council for quite some time, some of them, and a couple of new ones. The first one was a project for natural flood management, by which we mean the slowing of flow in the upper catchments using perhaps leaky dams, wooden across the streams, or extra ponds. We were focusing on the River Sherway, which joins the belt at Headcorn, and the South East Rivers Trust and the Upper Medway Drainage Board are doing a combined project here where we are funding, as Masonborough Council, funding South East Rivers Trust to design and implement the schemes, and Upper Medway Drainage Board are matching the funding with doing the work when things are designed. Just wanted to let people know that progress has been slower than we would have liked, where we were looking for up to 10 locations for from landowners to put this NFM in. 5 have now been identified and we're discussing with those, but we've also decided to have a look at some of the catchments of our own streams, more in the urban area on the Len, to see if we have any particular ideas ourselves. But the project is progressing, but not as fast as we would hoped. Recently in Headcorn, again, the Environment Agency approached us for assistance with delivering a flood alleviation scheme, similar to the one that was delivered in Yaldin, Collier Street and Hunton after the 2013 floods, where we think in Headcorn up to 98 homes may need protection from the risk of flooding. At the moment, the EA have identified a potential budget gap of £62,000 for the project, but at this stage they're simply asking for our in-principle support because they have to cost everything up and go back to central government as part of their national flood financing. If a financial contribution is requested, this would be brought to members at the appropriate time. The one that's been going for quite some while with a very long history is the Fair Meadow flood barrier, which has also hit the local press this week. The scheme requires KCC approval, and we've been attempting to get that for 4 years. They're still withholding consent for us to construct, manage and maintain the elements of the scheme, which in basic technical terms is to put a glass removable barrier at the end of the ramps near the Drake's pub to try and stop the water coming in through the subway. Officers have spent considerable time and effort dealing with KCC's queries. We were under the impression that these have been resolved, but now we have had to go to high level at KCC to get a meeting organised on 10th of October or earlier. Do we have a date? No. So this is just to inform you that this long-running project is still there, designed and ready to go. The costing and funding is ready and available, but the permission to put it by the side of the highway has not yet been produced. And the final item of community flood resilience in here is describing what the council is doing to support parish councils in this area of work, and I'm on the receiving end of that quite frequently in our area. So I'm asking you to comment on that, on any of the 4 items or the whole thing.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to indulge myself from our chairman's briefing the other day. One of the things that we kind of highlighted is the fact that drains in the roads are clogged up, and therefore that is flooding, backing up, going into houses and all of that kind of stuff. And we kind of discussed what we might do about that, and sort of lobbying KCC as one of the things that perhaps we could do with that. So I'd like your sort of comments on that. And also, you know, when I was a kid, they used to dredge canals and rivers. We don't seem to be doing that much anymore. Or they would deliberately flood fields so that it didn't flood houses. That's the kind of thing that used to happen. So what are your thoughts on those as potential flood alleviation measures?
If I can deal with the last one first, this is what the Natural Flood Management is trying to do, is to hold the water back either by putting it in some side pond and reverting the flow to a more sinuous swirly river rather than the channels that have been dug to try and get the water to the sea as fast as possible. And on the first point, having spent all morning compiling my parish's highways improvement plan for this year, the times that we have to report every single gully that hasn't been emptied is now becoming so monotonous that we've asked for a meeting with the KCC Highways person to come out and look at them all, because all we get as an answer when we report these is it's part of a maintenance programme. We'll come and do them when it's their turn. It's something that needs to be taken at higher level in KCC.
Yeah, the drains issue is quite interesting. I gather they changed companies recently in terms of the monitoring of them, and about 50% seem to be completely ignored and have been blocked for a very long time. So I'm guessing they don't have the right data, and clearly it's something that Mike will be taking up as part of his portfolio with the appropriate cabinet member there. But it is obviously a KCC thing, and I would encourage all local councillors to report as much as possible, because that's the way KCC get things done.
So, Councillor Harper first.
Yeah, I wonder, thank you, Chair. I wonder if on the Medway Street Fairmeadow barrier, because it was originally as part of the Bridges Gyratory scheme, we could take it up to Joint Transport Board and raise it there in a further forum where KCC are present, just to put that extra bit of pressure on them. Because, I mean, I remember, and I've probably seen over 30 odd reports from Mark on this since 2017, in the last 8 years, because it's been reported to us every single quarterly monitoring report you've written. It's always been this, why this barrier hasn't happened. And I know from discussions we agreed, or that it was determined that the glass barrier approach, which is what we're looking at here, that was probably a good 4 years ago that we were advised by experts that was the solution. And yet 4 years later, it hasn't happened. And now KCC is just putting up more and more obstacles to this. The rate we're going with this barrier designed to be, 1 in 50 years, the bottom of the high street is going to be flooded before this barrier is put in. If we just look at, we get many more deluges like we have over the last 4 or 5 days, that's going to be quite a high likelihood that will happen. And will KCC then pay for all the damage, to properties as a result? I think the community flood resilience, and I think I agree fully with what the leaders just said with Stuart, in terms of the gutters and gullies in the town centre or around the urban area. I mean, coming in tonight, there was the perennial flood at the bottom of Bowerman Road, and then on the Gyratory on the other side of town, and it just needs a bit of rain and they're flooded, right across the roads. I wonder whether longer term, perhaps within some of our parks, where we may have culverted streams going through them, that potentially we could look to break out and create ponds or holding areas. A bit like the idea with when the Len House development came up. I think part of that project, from memory, is to dug up a culverted part of the River Len to try to sort of improve it in terms of biodiversity, but it would also help address, this periodic flooding, which is, with our changing climate, it's just going to happen more and more. Yeah.
Just to let you know, Councillor Harper, I have written formally to the Director of Highways about the floodgates. Hence, we had a little bit of movement in terms of them coming back and saying no again, which makes me incredibly angry, because you're absolutely right. They are putting the businesses at the lower end of High Street absolutely at risk, and I think that's fundamentally unacceptable, and they've been doing so for 8 years. If we don't get this further meeting with them, if we haven't got a date in the next couple of weeks, I'll be writing to the cabinet member as well, and potentially the leader, and we'll just keep shouting until they come to the table, because it has to happen.
Go, Councillor Cleater.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad I suggested the JTB to you, Paul. literally, I want to know why KCC, because I suspect they're holding on to money. We know what happens, as I'm sure Councillor Clark will agree, with what happened over, you know, the Lewes Road, come the week chief. Where did that money go? Because all that seemed to have happened is they've closed, you know, Cranbourne Avenue. That was the great plan. Yes, we need to contact Simon Jones, the corporate director, but also the cabinet member. And I really do think, as we have KCC councillors on the JTB, and this is impacting on the road scheme that we were supposed to deliver, that was supposed to make things better, all I see is flooding. And also, Drake's is a historical building. It has historical significance to the county town. I've just said to Stanley that also we need to get the MP to write to them as well, because otherwise that money literally will disappear. In terms of drain clearing, probably we're better off getting a report from them telling us what they've cleared, which will be very few. And in terms of drainage, I went on the Swan Upping, the Mayor's Swan Upping, and actually one of the other things we need to speak to is Asda and Lidl about the amount of their trolleys that are ending up within the river, because the boat I was on had significant damage done to it because it was a whole shopping trolley, and because it hadn't been dredged, it was in the silt, etc. Now, these are people who volunteer and give their time to, you know, carry out this historical event. And if supermarkets want to keep trolleys out the way, then I suggest they store them in the shop, like they do in Germany. So someone with a pound coin just can't come and get one. You know, if they're causing problems, and I know it was a little trolley, because I recognise the handle, then if that's a problem, that needs to be dealt with. But KCC need to be held to account. It's money that's been allocated for that scheme, and I want to know what the significant issues are that are stopping that money being spent, because it's actually quite a simple solution to a difficult problem that has been going on for years and years and years. So I suggest we all get our letters, as people are very fond of writing letters at KCC, and we'll bombard them with letters of complaint, because the bottom of Broadway is always flooded. As you come round onto the terrace, that's always flooded. You know, and people deserve to be able to make their way around this town without significant flooding, and it doesn't take a major event for it all to flood. And unfortunately, a lot of the problems are a result of KCC, but also the Environment Agency need to up their game in terms of dredging, because I understand they're responsible for dredging the Medway. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coach.
I was just wondering whether there's any reassurance maybe from officers about KCC being the lead local flood authority, just as we've had the hottest summer, and that we might potentially be heading into a really warm winter that normally leads to rain, and Yalding is very much due a large flood, and we're all touching wood that it's not going to be this Christmas. But should we be concerned about KCC's ability to manage these events ahead, potentially? And are we working with neighbouring boroughs? Because obviously Yalding, we're very dependent on Tunbridge and the flood management there. Thank you.
From a legal point of view, Kent County Council is the lead local authority, and that's always the case, that the upper tier authority in an area has that responsibility. But there are other authorities with responsibilities. Maidstone Council has, hence this report. So we do try and work with Kent County Council, and actually, so far as the officers on the flood prevention side are concerned, we have a good relationship with them. And of course, as has been mentioned, the parishes have an important role, and we work with the parishes. So it is a multi-agency effort to, well, first of all, to prepare for flooding in the winter and then to address it.
Thank you. Councillor Summersgill.
Just to clarify, I do attend the Kent flood management board, meetings which are led by KCC, and the last one lasted half an hour in total. Nobody from the Environment Agency or the lead political part of the KCC were attending the meeting, just us flood management people.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, so we are recommendation page 95. Okay, so I'll take these all in one go because they're for noting. So, okay, so do we note items 1 to 4? Is that agreed? Okay, thank you very much. So, item 14. So, the property disposal policy. It's going to be introduced by Councillor Jeffrey, Leader of the Council.
Thank you. I'm not going to say very much because Mark's going to say lots. Basically, this is an update to existing policy. It's good practice to review policies from time to time, particularly with this policy, given that we are going into local government reorganisation, and we need to make sure that this policy is fit for the next 18 months or so, in which we can enact some of this stuff. There's a couple of little changes to it. One is around making sure that the policy protects, enhances natural and builds historic environments, etc. And the other one is around making sure we've got future arrangements for securing maintenance and sustainability of property. I think that's all I've got to say, Mark. Is there anything else to say on it?
No, I would just add to what the leader has said, that the policy picks up from the existing policy that was agreed back in 2017 and has made certain amendments, as the leader has described, and has generally aimed to tidy up the policy. If it's approved, then it restates the position and gives us clarity as we go into the preparations for local government reorganisation.
Visiting members?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillors. I'll keep mine brief because Councillor Clark's coming after me. So this is just more to highlight the report is a good report, and it has obviously highlighted some issues that have been updated. However, it's still very limiting for disposal of land. And I can just give you some examples on that. For example, and what I'm asking for is that within the report gets amended slightly for the recommendation that land can be given away freehold. And the reason for that is it impacts on some of the groups that you are disposing to land to. One, it gives them this uncertainty for the long-term longevity of the piece of land that has been given. There's normally a break clause in it, which is always a little bit on the side of the person that has the lease, and so favourable more to the council. And it limits the funding that some of these organisations can actually apply for, which then impacts on the aim that these groups and parishes and nature reserves have actually trying to aim to achieve. So there's a long-term effect to go with it. And I can give some examples. You know, there's some bits of land within my parish that I also sit on that there's a verge that's owned by 3 different people. And KCC have said that they'll give us the land. For example, if we get the land off MBC, they'll give us, you know, we can get the land, we can get it cut and maintained. However, if it's still within the ownership of the borough council, a lot of the parishioners, for example, go, well, if they own it, they maintain it. So again, with some of the disposal of land, there's actually a saving for the council to go with it. And like, you know, there's a few others within my ward that have been highlighted recently to go with it, and I think it's just very limiting. And we have disposed of land freehold before to people, and it was the council's policy when I first joined to go more for freehold than leasehold. That did change within the first couple of years of me being a councillor. So I just want that flexibility kind of brought back. Not saying that everyone has to be a freehold, but it would be nice to have that opportunity if, say, a parish is willing to take over a play area, with, especially with the changes to the unitary going on. And I can hear Mark talking to me saying there's probably possibly a bit covered in there, but I don't think it's descriptive enough to go with it. So I'll leave it there and I'll let Councillor Clark have his say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So really, I guess we both see eye to eye on this, myself and Councillor Wilby. The government, as part of austerity, the government went to local authorities and recommended looking at assets which could be a liability or a cost to the organisations, with a view to disposing of them to local community groups, parishes and the like. And I was involved in 2 pieces of land at the time. Both of them, the initial discussions with the council were that the freehold would go forward, and later on that changed to leasehold. So I'm looking at the report. I really urge members to consider an amendment where we can be a bit more flexible, because the one thing that we cannot do if we adopt this is later come along and say we think it would be better to move a freehold across to a parish council, but that would not be policy compliant. And prior to this meeting, I did have a discussion with Mark about this, because there's almost a sense that myself, Councillor Wilby, and perhaps others have, which is this policy would work if we weren't moving to a unitary. Because if we weren't moving to a unitary, there's a sense that the Mason Borough Council will be safeguarding this ad infinitum. So they are a good gatekeeper. They can make sure that we've got security of tenure, let's say, for instance, for a leasehold. As we go forward, Maidstone is going to dissolve, and we'll then be working with the unitaries. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's far more local than some of the groups that really value certain assets. They've got they take away the liability from the council. They've got volunteers that can do it without cost. So I really urge you to consider adding an extra part to this, which is not just leasehold, but also the potential for a freehold to transfer, should it be working with a local group like a parish council, a nature reserve, a body which is properly constituted. I understand you don't want a group to come along, set up and say, we want to take over ownership of Moat Park. You know, that we've got to do this within reason. And I'm not saying that would be the default. I think the default could be leasing, but I think we have to have the flexibility, because I think there are, as part of where we're moving forward in the next couple of years, I think there will be assets which will be very much better served if the freehold moves across to groups in certain instances, and I don't think that we should limit ourselves on that. But I also really endorse Councillor Wilby's point about the long-term planning, because when you're a nature reserve, you have to think about your funds going much, much longer than a 15-year cycle. You have to think about what you're planting today for 40, 50, 100 years on from now. And if we've got break clauses that are stemming, you know, let's say 7 years into the lease, if we go out to groups that are willing to give us funding, and then they find that actually, you know what, we may give that to you and you may not even exist in 7 years, I think that you really, really put the shackles on those groups. So I urge the committee to consider an amendment, and the cabinet member also, to allow for that flexibility. Thank you.
Come to Councillor Jeffrey first in response.
I'll just come back on that concept of freehold flexibility. Having discussed it with Mr. Green, we're more than happy to include that flexibility into the policy.
Yep.
I think the point that I would make is, regardless of whether it's freehold or leasehold, what the policy seeks to do is to set out the criteria for any disposal, because in the end, what everyone wants to achieve is that the benefits from the land, particularly if it's open space, accrues to the community. And the sense sometimes has been that, well, actually the council is an appropriate guardian of the land over the long term. But what we're now saying in the policy is our future arrangements for operation and maintenance of the property in the event of a disposal sustainable over the long term. So I think that's really the crux of the matter. If the council can be satisfied that the body that is acquiring the land, and chances are if it's a parish council, if it's a well-established trust, then it will have the longevity and the resources to maintain the land. But that's the key thing. We don't want to risk disposing of land and then finding that if it's of environmental value, it deteriorates, or that the purchaser then sells it on. That's what we need to avoid, and this criterion seeks to achieve that.
Can I just ask for clarification? So, at the outset there in the response, it was as if you were kind of acknowledging that the visiting councillors had a point, but are you now reverting back to the policy itself is good enough?
I think this is the criterion is the overriding factor. We can change the detail in here because the detail talks about a presumption in favour of leasehold, so we can remove that to make it equivalent as to leasehold or freehold so far as the method of disposal is concerned.
Fantastic, thanks for clearing that up. So it can be freehold or leasehold in the policy. Okay. Do we need to? That's okay, we don't need to do a motion or anything. Okay, cool, thank you. Councillor Harper, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, I was going to, actually I'd written down before coming here more or less the same thing from my involvement with, for instance, the Found Wildlife Group in my ward, but also, as Stuart will know, there's the old, we don't own it, but the Astravila farmland site. If that freehold was with Maidstone Council, there may be a good case, for instance, to pass it over to one of our local charities to actually maintain it as an open space rather than selling it for what KCC would want to do. So I think it would be very good if we strengthen the things about passing on and also recognising that in the urban area at the moment we don't have parishes. We do have a number of sort of community charities, and we may have a parish council or multiple ones in the next 2 or 3 years, but currently we don't. So we just have to, I say in the urban area, be a bit more flexible, because whereas you might pass something to a parish council, if they don't have parishes, you have to think of other alternatives. But I can see Stuart's in complete agreement, so quite happy to leave the cabinet to thrash out the relevant wording to achieve what we want.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Conyard.
Thank you, Chair. It appears we're more or less in broad agreement on this. May I suggest when the Cabinet do get around to discussing this and how this might be amended, that we put it to a point that it comes back to the appropriate pack before final decision for any individual case where a request for freehold is made, and it's still got beneficial parts.
So did you want the policy to come back to PAC or the decisions?
Just any individual decisions. So if there was a case, it's going to be quite likely in instance this PAC anyway, that on a case-by-case basis, if there is a special case, that it just comes back so there's a quick review.
Councillor Conyard, can we ask, is that an amendment or is that just a question?
It was a question / request.
Okay.
I trust the Cabinet.
So just so you know, disposals over 100,000 will come through because they're a member decision. So ones underneath won't, but yeah, the major stuff will.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, no. So the recommendation is on page 102. So that the updated disposal policy be adopted, and presumably that's that includes the amendment that has been agreed. So, does the committee agree with that? Okay, thank you very much. So, the first of our additional items, 14A. I hope you've all had a chance to read these papers, being lastminute.com, but this is going to be introduced by Councillor Jeffrey, Leader of the Council.
It's all about me this evening, isn't it? So 14A, this is the community, Heather House Community Development, 11 houses, project's almost complete. It was originally approved by Cabinet in April 2 years ago. The houses are affordable, part of the house building programme. 7 of the houses are for social rent, and the other 4 are to be first homes. The first homes must be sold to first-time buyers, minimum 30% discount, and a maximum sale price capped at 250k, and I think the figures are in the paper. We have 4 purchasers, and we're hopefully those transactions will complete later this month. The reason the papers come here is the original project approval for the sale of the homes referred to the sale of the homes, but the recommendations and eventual decision were not specific in respect of the required sales, which underpins the business case. So the decision wasn't quite made at the time. So now we're having to make that decision via in order to complete the sales of the 4 properties. So hence it's coming here, and then hopefully as long as there's no particular hiccups that we haven't noticed, which is why I'm looking to you guys, we can then make sure that those homes are sold to their new families.
Thank you very much. And I believe that you intend to make the decision following this meeting. Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Cleater.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You've actually given me the clarification for one of the answers I was going to ask, was who are they going to be sold to? And I've actually checked with the ward councillors, and they are okay with what's proposed, obviously. First-time buyers, especially local people, very welcome for them to get on the housing ladder, and I think it's important that they do. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the committee? No? Okay. So on page 129, we were asked to agree to sell the First Homes properties and delegate authority to the Director of Finance and Business Improvement to complete all the necessary paperwork and legal processes to complete the sale of the First Homes properties. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. The last one, was it? Part of it's going to be in closed session. No?
Yes, it will be introduced by Stuart, and if they want to go to party, very likely to get to this bit.
Okay, all right. So item 15, property disposal. It's going to be introduced by Councillor Jeffrey, Leader of the Council.
I'm loving it tonight. I'll keep it very brief. You've got the papers in front of you. This is one of the situations of property disposal that we've just been discussing. It's to support the delivery of the of homes as part of the LPR, and well, I won't go into the numbers obviously because we'll have to go into closed session to do that. But the council has had an external valuer, and we believe that this does represent good value. And I'm sure Mark's going to come in and fill in a few more details if he wants to.
I've nothing to add to that.
So on this item, we have visiting members intending to speak. So visiting members.
wasn't I was tending to speak, it's I was told I had to disclose that I have an interest in this item.
Yes, I had asked to speak, but I've been told that I shouldn't be speaking because of an interest. Thank you.
Councillor Harper.
Can I suggest that we go into private session, because we can't really, without discussing what's on the yellow papers, come to any view tonight. So I think we should just go straight into the yellow papers based on the exempt category. I'm sure Jordan knows the wording we need to move.
Okay, so propose then that we go into closed session then. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. sorry, after the closed session, can I ask Councillor Harper to propose that again for the record?
I propose the recommendations as in the report with the add-on that the points which came up in discussion with the add-on that the Director of Finance has discussions with the Director of, I forgot what's William's name? Director of Regeneration, to pick up the points which were discussed in closed session.
Yeah, that'll do. Okay, we can vote on it again. Okay, votes in favour? Votes against? Abstentions?
I'm abstaining because I'm on the planning committee.
Okay, thank you. Right, so that concludes our business. So I now declare the meeting